Assalamu alaikum. Microsoft, the company that you have at least one older relative telling you how much richer they would have been had they invested in earlier. That's the company we're going to analyze in this video. We're going to talk about whether or not Microsoft is a halal stock to invest in. We're going to talk about Microsoft's investment prospects, and at the end I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. By the way, don't mind my computer in the background. Windows is being updated. So without further ado, let's get started. Microsoft's revenue comes from three segments. The Intelligent Cloud segment, featuring Azure, Enterprise Services, GitHub, and server products such as SQL Server and Windows Server. This represents around 35% of its revenue. Productivity and Business Processes segment, which includes Dynamics, LinkedIn, and Office. This represents around 33% of its revenue. And the More Personal Computing segment, and this contains search advertising, Surface, Windows, and Xbox, and this comes out to around 32% of its revenue. So basically, each of these different segments represents a third of Microsoft's revenue. Now, notice how the names of Microsoft's revenue segments tell you precious little about the actual products they represent. This is because it is, after all, Microsoft we're talking about here, and things that are intuitive are against company policy. Now, a few comments on Microsoft's revenue breakdown. I see nothing inherently haram in any of its revenue sources. It is certainly true that some imagery on some of the games that are played on Xbox do not meet Islamic standards. However, keeping in mind that only a subset of games played on Xbox have these types of imagery, and the fact that many of these games aren't created by Microsoft, and the fact that Xbox is only one product amongst a whole host of products that contribute to Microsoft's revenue, I think it's plausible to say that games that contain imagery that do not meet Islamic standards do not represent a material contribution to Microsoft's bottom line. From an investment perspective, something that's undeniably positive about the revenue breakdown that we just saw is the fact that Microsoft's revenue comes from a whole suite of products rather than one or two. So if one product underperforms or dies off, the rest of Microsoft's portfolio of products can potentially compensate for this. So in a sense, owning Microsoft stock can provide a respectable level of diversification in technology. By the way, I think it's a good time to mention that this is not investment advice. Make sure you do your own due diligence and invest accordingly. Never invest money that you can't afford to lose. Additionally, if you're enjoying this video, I'd really appreciate if you left a like and subscribe for more content like it. Going back to Microsoft's revenue and the different segments that make up its revenue, something that stands out to me when I read through the list of Microsoft products is that none of these products really stand out to me as outstanding products. Yes, I do think that Microsoft Office, for example, does provide some unique value. But is it anything that I would write home about? Have I ever been excited about a new release? No. To their credit though, or their discredit, depending on how you want to look at it, Microsoft has done pretty well for itself, pumping out good enough Me Too products and maintaining a monopoly wherever it can. This has translated itself into some pretty robust financials for Microsoft. In their most recent quarterly filing, which was Q1 of the fiscal year 2021, total cash equivalents, and short-term investments for Microsoft was around $138 billion, which means that they definitely owe some zakat. Total assets for Microsoft was around $300 billion compared to $177 billion in total liabilities. So a ratio of 2-to-1, which is healthy. Microsoft generated around $19 billion in cash, again for the first quarter of their fiscal year 2021. In terms of gross margin, they are pulling in $26 billion on $37 billion in revenue for a gross margin of around 70%. they've really benefited from their transition to a subscription-based model as opposed to one-time sales, and it's showing up for Microsoft in their numbers. In terms of their use of interest in their operations, for the previous 12 months for Microsoft's 2020 fiscal year, interest income was around $2.6 billion, interest expense was $2.5 billion, revenue for Microsoft was $143 billion, total expenses were $90 billion. So this means that interest income over revenue was around 1.8%, whereas interest expense over total expenses was around 2.8%. So while the use of interest is not the ideal level of zero at Microsoft, it's not at a level where I feel the company is reliant on interest to operate, or that the use of interest is part and parcel of their business model. Now let's talk about Microsoft's valuation. Trading at around $200 per share, it has a valuation of close to $1.5 trillion. To put the enormity of this number into perspective, the GDP of Russia is $1.6 trillion. The PE ratio for Microsoft is right around 30, which may be a bit pricey, but not a whole lot. The average NASDAQ PE ratio right now is close to 22, and I think Microsoft's financials are better than average. So in summary, regarding Microsoft, I think it's a halal investment to make. I think their revenue predominantly comes from halal. They have very limited dealings with interest. And I think they have a net positive impact on society and the environment. If you look at their Office product, for example, they have close to 45 million subscribers to their Office product. And you can just imagine how much that is enabling people to be more productive. Additionally, in January of this year, Microsoft announced their goal of becoming carbon negative by 2030, meaning they would remove more carbon than they emit into the environment. So that's a positive as well. So I'm comfortable investing in Microsoft from a halalness perspective. From an investment perspective, I see Microsoft as basically a reasonably priced company with average products but stellar financials. It seems Microsoft's management are basically expert at squeezing every last dollar from every ounce of product they have. Just don't count on them to come up with any innovation or game-changing products. So is Microsoft going to 10x, or is it going to make you rich? Probably not. Are they going to go bankrupt? Probably not also. Personally, I think it's reasonable to expect that they will moderately outperform the NASDAQ over the next 3 years. Now, will I be investing? No, because I'm still at the aggressive part of my investing journey. This means that for me, I am targeting at least 30% annualized returns whenever I invest in stocks. And currently, I don't see a clear path for Microsoft to achieve these types of returns over the next 3 to 5 years. So just because they aren't a good fit for me right now in this stage of my investing career, that doesn't mean that they are necessarily not a good fit for you. Microsoft may be a good way to get some halal investment exposure in technology. Also, for me, as a policy, I don't invest in companies whose products I am not a fan of, and I'm simply not a fan of Microsoft's engineering in general. Hopefully my Windows will finish updating soon. Full disclosure, that's a static screen. That's not actually Windows updating, so that I'm not unfair to Microsoft. If you'd like to buy Microsoft stock and you live in the United States, go to M1 Finance using the link in the description to support the channel. If you found anything in this video beneficial, I'd really appreciate if you left a like, subscribe for more content. Until next time, make sure to take care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you all.